You are listening to the Postcast presented by the Locked On Senators podcast and, of course, the Glebe Central Pub. The Glebe Central Pub is our pub in Ottawa at 779 Bank Street in the heart of the Glebe. Every time we go there, we have a blast. We had an absolute blast on Saturday celebrating the Sens win over the San Jose Sharks. All Sens fans should go to the Glebe Central Pubs. Check out the website and go on the Glebe Central Pub Send shuttle to and from the game. It is a blast. I'm your host, Brandon Piller, joined by Jack Richardson after a disappointing result, but a very exciting game with a whole lot of talking points as the Ottawa Senators lose 5-4 in the shootout to the Washington Capitals. Jack, you messaged in the group chat about, I don't know, halfway through this game being like, Pillsy, we're going to have one heck of a vent cast. And then things turned around. Where did this game turn from a guaranteed vent cast to a much more exciting game for Sens fans?
I mean, I don't know. I think there were a couple shifts from Jake Sanderson over my shoulder there that we'll talk about him a lot. We'll talk about everyone because that ended up being a great game. Lots to talk about, from coaches' challenges to whether they should have challenged, whether they should have challenged later in the third period, bad line changes, just storming back on the power play, everyone getting it done. Like, there's a lot of things to talk about. So selfishly, Pillsy, I'm excited because you and I have done a lot of shutout losses and a lot of in not even just this season, just in general. So it is a shootout loss, but man, you look at the standings and yeah, it's tough. The Rangers passed the Sens, whatever, but I'm not kidding. Every single point feels like 2 points at this time of year, especially in this race. It's 6 teams that are within 1 point, I think, of the wild card race right now. It's unbelievable. So points, I think, should be celebrated as wins at this time of the year, especially when you come back from 3-0 down. And you're right. Yeah, I'll put my hand up. I said this game was over when it was 3-0. Thought it was a similar game to the Winnipeg game, but the Sens kept battling, and it proves again that when they're a fully healthy team, they're a lot to handle. And it's Shane Pinto getting them on the board. I thought Jake Sanderson was outstanding. That's why I mentioned him. I think he kind of turned this game around. I really felt like he kind of put the team on his shoulders in the second period, battling with Tom Wilson, and that kind of sent the message. And then the team responded in the third period.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're disappointed you don't get the 2 points in this tight race, like you mentioned, Jack. But when you're down 3-0 halfway through this game to the Eastern Conference leading Washington Capitals team, and you find a way to storm back and almost win this one, you just lose by 1 goal in the shootout. It's hard to really have a true vent cast and be really upset at the result of this game. Now, let's get into how this game started, because it really couldn't have started much worse for the Ottawa Senators. It's a shot from the point. It rolls over Allmark's pad. It's just sitting there. McMichael whacks at it and knocks it in. Now, the Sens, they challenge this for goaltender interference. I know people in the chat are really adamant that that was goalie interference. And the Sens video coach, Mike King, has been pretty good at getting those challenges right. But unfortunately, this one doesn't go the Sens' way, and you're down 1-0, and now you've got to kill a penalty as well. Jack, how strongly did you feel that was the right play to challenge that there? Because that was a big part of this game.
I don't, in hindsight, I don't hate the call. I prefer them to challenge than to sit back. And quite honestly, like, I know it was a different situation in the game, and I'm going to be hypocritical because on Twitter I was saying that was a bad challenge, especially with how weak the PK has been this season. So, I'm sitting here, but then third period, I thought they could have maybe challenged that fourth goal, which we'll get into. And I was a little disappointed that they didn't, but to me, goalie interference, it's a coin flip. But like I mentioned, I think when it's a coin flip and when you think it is, and I'd imagine the Sens coaching staff and video staff thought that too. And again, let's not say this was Mike King radioing in saying, we got to challenge this. It could have just been Green saying, I think we have a shot here. He gets the call at the end, the final call. That's kind of my stance is I like the challenge if you have a good penalty kill, and the Sens don't. And I know that they didn't get burned on the penalty kill necessarily, but it's a 4-on-4 goal, ends up happening because you were shorthanded, whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of where I sat on it. I don't know, Pillsy. I mean, Ullmark makes contact with McMichael. We can play this game of going back and forth and looking at other examples around the league, other examples that have happened to the Sens this year. It just doesn't do anyone any justice. It's something the NHL's got to fix because it's going to happen in a playoff game. It already has happened. but it'll happen to the Sens and then it'll bother us. So I definitely thought that was worth a challenge, but tough just because they didn't have a good start and it just kept piling on after that.
Goaltender interference is so tough to tell. Like, it's not a black and white call. Personally, that one wasn't clear enough for me to challenge it, in my opinion. I'm not saying whether it was goalie interference or not. I don't pretend to know. I don't. If you think you know exactly what goalie interference is, you're lying. So that wasn't clear enough for me to be confident to challenge it.
I think something that's worth mentioning too is the rule, and I'm putting it in quotations because it's so subjective sometimes, but it's if the goalie's impeded from making the save. And yeah, Ullmark kind of, it looks like he runs into him and it stops his progress. But I feel like after that, he has a chance to maybe scoop the puck out. Like it kind of hits off of him and then goes in. So maybe they're saying,
hey, hit the post too there.
Like, yeah, like he had a shot. Yeah. Now, devil's advocate to that. Remember Drake Batherson in Nashville? Probably the same thing. Saros had a chance to get that puck, but we don't have to go there. I mean, there were 9 goals or 8 goals in this game, Pilsy. We don't need to hum and haw about that one. But at the time, I thought that was kind of, it might stand as the game winner. We've seen this team get shut out a lot on the road. So you don't know. And a lot, it's early in the game. It was a minute and a half in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, before this game starts, Jack, the 2 games were a 1-0 game and then an overtime game. So every goal counts. And then this one ends in a shootout. Like, these are tight games. So that's how this game starts. Then Washington's able to get another goal later on. Dubois sneaks behind Batherson. Tough one for Batherson as he's puck watching there. And then Dubois gets behind him and he buries it. That makes it 2-0 at this point. I don't know about you, Jack, but I'm kind of throwing my hands up and I'm like, oh boy, like this is getting out of control real quick.
It's a here we go again moment when that goes in. And but I did really like the Sens push after that. And ironically, that was at 7 Eastern, I think, when their games usually start. So they finally woke up. Bit of an earlier start tonight. But I didn't mind their game other than that first 5-10 minutes. And I know in the second period they end up giving another one, but I thought they started to push back. And that's when you can start to see, like, they come in waves when they've got everyone healthy, right? It's Stutzle, then Norris, then Pinto coming over the boards, and you got Sanderson, Chabot. Like, it's there's a process you can see with this team that I think we saw after that goal, and I really liked their game from then on out.
And a big part of the momentum shift, or at least someone that tried to create a momentum shift, was the captain, Brady Tkachuk. Look, this is why he's the leader. Sometimes the offense isn't clicking and you got to find other ways to create a spark. He goes toe to toe with Tom Wilson at center ice. Funny enough, it was G that kind of instigates this. He throws a hit/collision on Wilson. I think it was a bit of both, Jack, but it catches Wilson off guard. He doesn't like it. And he goes right to Claude Giroux, and Brady just looks over and he's like, no. Like, you're not about to try to bait Claude Giroux into fighting you, Tom Wilson. Like, I won't allow that. And he kind of, I don't want to say reluctantly, but Brady wasn't exactly stoked or charging over there to accept that fight, but he knew he wasn't going to let Claude be the guy that steps in there.
Well, this was a rare fight for Tkachuk, just in the sense that most of his, I think there was a stat earlier this year that came out where most of his fights are in losses and they're down by a few goals. And we know that it's just when frustration boils over a lot of the time. He rarely fights to wake the team up, I find. I just off the top of my head, so I like that spot a lot for him. Like, that's what he can do. And quite honestly, he wasn't very noticeable before that. And it's when you're that kind of player and you're not really having an impact on your first few shifts, the best way to do it is drop the gloves. Those two guys have a history. I'd imagine Tom Wilson was a little bit disappointed to be left off Team Canada, and then even more disappointed when he saw what ended up happening in Montreal. Like, you better believe he would have been out on the ice for Canada in that scenario in Montreal. 100%. But back to the Sens, like, I think that's what you want Brady doing. And you can see his neck, he's just all scratched up and stuff, but that's what he does. And I think if he's doing it in those spots where even it's at the end of a period, you kind of the last minute, 2 minutes of a period don't really typically end up mattering that much in the first and second. So I like that spot a lot. Like that. I've been one of the people who have been saying Tkachuk can't be fighting. I don't want him fighting. He's too important, but I like that spot a lot.
And it's funny because Tom Wilson and him got pretty close to dropping the gloves last time these two teams played. They kind of showed a montage of all the interactions these two guys have had, and finally Brady accepts the challenge. And I thought it was a pretty good tilt. Like, I think Wilson got the better of a couple haymakers, but then Brady gets the takedown, and nobody's really too worse for wear on that one. So good tilt between two heavyweight guys that are a big part of their teams. So that's pretty much how the first period ends. Second period gets going. The Ottawa Senators, they actually get a power play that they don't get a lot on. It was Ovechkin penalty as well. And the Sens were buzzing to start that second period, Jack. They were out shooting the Caps 9-0, 6 minutes in, but then they get a pesky too many men penalty, which I feel like the Sens probably lead the league in too many men penalties, although it went back the Washington Capitals way later on in the game. But that was tough because the Sens had momentum there. And then the Washington Capitals have a top 10 power play in the league. The Sens all collapse at the net. Dubois beside the net. He spots Wilson, open high slot, feeds him for a one-timer, and he blasts it past Linus Ullmark. Jack, I was mentioning today on the show that Tom Wilson leads this team in power play goals. Now, Ovechkin's missed some time. I think Wilson has 15 more games than Ovi and only had 2 more power play goals. But still, he was a guy that's a threat on the power play. And Mike Johnson did a good job describing it on the broadcast. The way the Caps were switching really confused the Sens, and that allowed Wilson to have that open opportunity.
Yeah, just a PSA here. If you're teams that are going to play the Ottawa Senators listening right now, players, coaches, whatever, stop listening, because I'm going to poke some holes in the Sens PK that I don't want anyone to know. Just put on some earmuffs, throw it on mute, whatever you need to do. It's kind of fascinating that Zub and Sanderson, who are so good at even strength, look lost on the penalty kill. And it's just the coaching to me. Like, it's whatever they're being told to do, whatever they're taught to do. When you get mixed up like that, it's your wires crossing. It's not because they don't know where to be or where the puck is going to go. It's because they're trying to get to a spot they're supposed to be because of the system. And it just doesn't work. I don't know what it is. And I know on Saturday on Hockey Night in Canada, you were at the game, Pilsy, but after I think the first period, Kevin Bieksa actually broke down what the Sens are doing on their PK, because remember those times they let Toffoli walk in on the penalty kill a couple times, just have all day. He was explaining that's on purpose. He was saying that that's this pre-scout that they're doing on the Sharks. Anyway, not to get ahead of myself, that's just how they play. They play this diamond, and every power play goal against the Sens ends up starting from down low, and they just don't. I find their forwards are so ineffective in their own zone. Once they get up ice and they actually skate and they get to play, they score a bunch of shorthanded goals. But I think they're too stagnant, and it's going to be a problem down the stretch to me, because look at some of the teams they're going to be playing. Like, they got to play Detroit, whose power play is unbelievable. The Rangers have a great power play. Montreal's got a good power play. Like, they've got these teams that they're going to have to not only play against a couple times, but also beat for a playoff spot here. Columbus too. I'm sure they have a good power play. Like, it's just all these teams that they're going to have to tighten up on the penalty kill a little bit. And on that one too, Ullmark lost his edge. I didn't even catch that until the replay. He wasn't set, and that's a problem too. I thought he was fine overall tonight, Ullmark, but that's just a tough one, right?
I thought people in the chat were really dogging on Ullmark. Obviously not his best game, but I thought he had some huge saves. Like, he had 2 massive saves on OV one-timers. Like,
you know what?
That is the greatest goal scorer ever, and from his spot, and Ullmark had those saves. So I'm not about to say Ullmark's stole the show, or I'm not going to have him as a standout, but I think dogging him here is a little much, especially with 41 shots.
I completely agree. Yeah, I thought he was fine. And honestly, I think in most of his games, other than the Montreal one, he's been good enough for them to win. Like, even the Winnipeg one, the Florida ones, like I thought he was good enough. He wasn't as bad as we've seen Forsberg play at times this season. So yeah, I know it was a 5-4 shootout loss, and he gets worked on that shootout goal, but it's a shootout. Like, I don't know. I think Ullmark is finding his groove, and that save on Ovi was ridiculous. Maybe that was the turning point, because that would have been 3-0 in the first period. So I thought I thought Ullmark was fine tonight.
Yeah, so did I. So that's what brings this game to 3-0. And at that point, the Ottawa Senators, they know they're in trouble. They know they got to figure out a way to turn this one around. And they do turn this game around eventually. And a big part of it comes with the power play, as we're going to get into. But if you want to make a power play on your Friday, Saturday night, there's no better place to go than the Glebe Central Pub. I got the hat right here. Our guy Blair hooked us up with some merch. We got 2 hats. We got the hoodie. I love this hat because it represents how much I love the Glebe Central Pub. They are in the heart of the Glebe at 779 Bank Street. Every time Ross and I are back in the nation's capital, we make sure to go to our pub. And they love Sens fans, guys. They have a Sens shuttle that will get you on the bus, takes you to the game. Sue, the bus driver, is an absolute legend. She'll get you there quicker than anyone else can, faster than an Uber, faster than your buddy trying to navigate through traffic on the highway. Sue will get you there, and you get a round trip for only $17. In this economy, you can't beat that. And then it brings you right back to the pub so you can celebrate a victory or drown your sorrows if things don't go the right way, and have a vent cast with some of your buddies on some bar stools. We had the smash burgers, Jack, in honor of the Hamburglar night. They were absolutely delicious. Good food, great drinks. The serving staff was incredible. So there's no better place to go for Sens fans, in my opinion, than the Glebe Central Pub. And you know what? I was talking about this economy. You know, the best part is the vibes there. They come at a pretty reasonably priced price, Jack. How much are the vibes at the GCP?
I believe it's free 99, Pilsy. I believe the vibes are free 99 at the Glebe Central Pub.
That's right. The vibes are free at the GCP. So check it out, guys. 779 Bank Street. This episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a great snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, crack into a source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Pistachios are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I love the black pepper and salt flavor. It comes in that purple bag. Or if you don't want to waste time cracking shells, you just want the pistachios as quick as possible, try the no shells variety. But I like the shells. I like having to work for my snack and get a little bit of reward. And then it lasts a little longer. You're watching a movie and you're working away slowly at the pistachios. It's a nice reward, and they are delicious snacks. Our guy Owen loves pistachios. So Owen, Wonderful Pistachios is for you. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, guys, quick breather there as we get back into the postcast. I'm Brandon Piller, joined by Jack Richardson. We got producer Ross working the board here, and we left off, Jack, at the 3-0 mark. I like to go through the game chronologically. You know, this is how I like to do it, guys. We left off at 3-0, and then who else, Jack? The same guy that opened the scoring for the Sens in the last game, Shane Pinto, gets a goal as I honestly think, and I'll slide it over to you here, Jack, the same way Sandy slid it over to Pinto. I think Pinto or Sandy was the star of that goal.
I think Jake Sanderson had his best game in probably the season. He was a monster. We're used to him doing it defensively, but I think the book on Sanderson has always been like he'll figure out the offense eventually. He's done it at every level, asserted himself defensively, gotten used to everything, and then at some point the offense just clicks. And to be honest, he hasn't really been anywhere long enough in his career to kind of see that. You know what I mean? Like college, he was there for a couple of years, just started to scratch the surface. Then he signs his deal. He was all over the ice, Pilsy. Like his speed was unbelievable. And it wasn't even that goal. So yeah, he makes the nice play where he fakes out, I think even Pinto. I don't think Pinto was trying to pass to him in the neutral zone. Beats Carlson with that strong play on his stick. Great pass over. Goal. And then the next shift, he's out there. He has a rush up the ice. He almost scores again. Like Sanderson was everywhere. And when he's playing like that, like to me, that was, I mentioned it off the top, like that's when you're looking at Sanderson saying, this is a star. And he's saying, we're not losing this game, or we're not going down in regulation at least. I really thought he turned the tide for them. He was everywhere. And his battles with Tom Wilson later in the I think it was in the second period still. Like he was all over it tonight. And a little sneak peek at our SensCentral Standouts, I think, there with all that. But yeah, I think that pass was great. And Pinto, man, what's that now? 3 goals in his last 2 games since being back. Yep. It's pretty good. When
Shane Pinto scores, the Sens are 9-0-1. That was their first loss this year when Shane Pinto scores. Or Yeah, this year. Yeah. So like
And now what's 8 or 17 1-1 with a point this season? I guess that
yeah,
would be.
something
Yeah,
the point one is right up there
crazy.
too. So yeah, Shane Pinto, this guy gets it done for the Ottawa Senators. That leads in to the third period where the Ottawa Senators are on the power play. And I think, Jack, this was the biggest momentum swing in the game, in my opinion. Because if they don't score on this power play, it's 3-1, and then a team like Washington will just shut things down and they'll find a way to get the win. And Washington wanted this one badly as they were down. They had lost 3 straight games coming into this, but the Sens, they were buzzing here. Timmy back to Sandy, over to Giroux on the dot, and he one times it hard and scores on the power play. Like, we haven't seen old man Claude wind it up and rip it, not even rip it, slap shot it that hard since the shootout, really. Like, he hasn't done it much this year, but that was an absolute bomb from our guy G.
I get so excited when Claude Giroux scores, man. It's just, I know it hasn't been as often this season. I think he had his career high in goals a couple of years ago with the Sens, but yeah, it doesn't get old watching the old man put it in. And like, what I love about Giroux too is, and I keep getting ahead of myself. I know we're going through it chronologically, but even at the end of the game when he's, in that timeout when they had the ISO cam on the Sens,
he's basically a player coach there.
He's the coach. Like, I think when he's ready to hang him up, he could just kind of move right up beside Alfie on the bench there, because Giroux has been it's definitely been a down year for Claude Giroux overall. But I'll put it this way, Pillsy, down the stretch here, if he can get hot, everyone will forget about the first 60 games. If he can get hot and do what he did, score timely goals, just kind of be that difference maker that he was a few seasons ago when he signed here. Like, that was a big, big goal. And I think, I'm thinking even of that Boston game when I think Josh Norris tied it, but it was Giroux kind of, directing the play. He slid it over. Like, just things like that is when you look at G and you're like, wow, that's a big game player who's played in games like this and none of these other guys have. So right now, I think Giroux, now he passed Frank Mahovlich, and I got to be honest, man, I have never heard of Frank Mahovlich, and I might be dating myself there. I'll put my hand up on that one. OG Maple Leaf makes sense. I haven't heard of him, but he passed him in points for 66 in NHL history, 1,104 for Claude Giroux. So he just keeps getting it done. I know everyone's talking about Ovi. Ovi's getting all these records and everything, but don't forget about Claude Giroux. He's also doing it.
Well, Jack, if we want to talk about records, I got one that you're going to know in-house. How about Tim Stutzle, the longest ever assist streak in franchise history at 11 games, and he extends his point streak to 12 games. Jack, we were talking, you let us know in the postcast that it was plus money for Tim Stutzle to get an assist, so I hope you put your money where your mouth was and cashed in on that one, because Tim Stutzle gets it going, and thank goodness, because as you guys know, Ross and I got the buzz cuts here. If we would have got the buzzes and that would have ended Timmy's point streak, I don't know what I would have done. That would have been some major bad vibe. So I'm glad that that didn't happen, and Timmy now holds a franchise record.
Even for him, like, I don't know how superstitious Stutzle is, but it was great that he played along with you guys, joined live on Sunday morning for the postcast when you guys were getting the buzz cut. Looks great, by the way, Pills. Yeah, I should add.
Thank you.
Imagine if he didn't, like, he lost the point streak. They got thumped tonight. And then he's thinking to himself, he's like, I watched these two get buzz cut and then I lost my point streak. So it is great that he was on the board. 2 assists. He set up Tkachuk's game tying goal as well. But yeah, I mean, it's been really impressive, especially after a really quiet stretch in terms of his standards, I'd say for about a month and a half when they were winning games. But 12-game point streak, longest assist streak in Sens history, which is crazy. The fact that these guys are setting records for, like, they flashed the Tkachuk overtime. I know he didn't score in overtime, but I know he set that earlier this year. Overtime goals as a Senator. Like, it's crazy. These guys are just growing up in front of us and like setting records that have been there forever, which is pretty cool for Tim Stutzle. I don't know how many back he is of, it was Heatley, I think, at 22 games. So long way to go for that for a point streak, but we'll take it one game at a time for Tim Stutzle. That'd be great if he can get up there.
Yep, absolutely. So, and then the Ottawa Senators, they're able to tie it shortly after. Really, Greg with the steal, flips it up to Shabby. He brings it in over to Amadio, and then Amadio just backhands it towards the net. Pinto's going hard to the net. He gets a stick on it. Then Eller deflects it in front, and it goes in. That ties it up at 3-3. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, these boys are right back in it. They got some momentum. And then they get a power play shortly after. And it's Pinner that draws it. Protas trips Pinto. And unfortunately, they don't get anything on the power play. And right when the power play ends, the second unit guys are gassed, and this is one those guys are going to see in the video room after, Jack, because that was about as bad a line change as you can have. All three forwards decide to go on the bench as Washington is entering the zone, and the Caps are able to do tic-tac-toe passes with ease, and then it's a defensive defenseman, Fairbury, I always mess his name up. He rips it top shelf as he's completely wide open, and that makes it 4-3. And then we already talked about one goal challenge, Jack, so we can get into this one too. The coaches on the Sens bench are talking back and forth. I got to be honest, it looks like Alfie nods and says, yeah, let's challenge it. And he's got his hand to his ear kind of listening in. And then so the ref sees that, goes over to the timekeeper box and starts making the announcement. And then Travis Green is just losing his mind, being like, whoa, what are we doing here? No, I said no challenge, no challenge. And then the Caps are sitting there being like, wait, he was going to challenge. He can't decide not to challenge it. Now he's got to get a penalty now. Like, that was just a wild series of events. I'm not even 100% sure what the challenge was supposed to be. I'm assuming offside.
I think they were looking at goalie interference. I think,
okay.
like,
yeah,
I mean, because he brushed Olmark, and that's at least what they showed on the replay. So I'm assuming that's what they were looking at. But and that to me is why I think it was Green's call, being like, no, I'm not doing this again. Like, can you imagine if they lost they lost the challenge and then get shorthanded, and it's 5-3, and the game's over at that point, right? So it ended up being the right call. But I mean, again, you never know. You maybe end up getting that one. I was pretty disappointed in that play, man. Like, I'm so glad they tied it after, because that was, after all the work they did to come back, that line change from those three forwards was brutal. Like, just as bad as it gets. I know they're tired, but man, Wilson came all the way around the net with the puck. Pinto's with them every step of the way, then kind of leaves them, and Wilson didn't dump it in. Like, you got to stay with him. I know Pinto's tired, but you can't just let him go, assuming your guys have it. And then Norris can't change there. Greg can't. Like, it's bad. I kept seeing more red jerseys come in the screen. I was like, where is everyone? And that's tough one too. Just before we wrap up here, we'll get to a break, but that's the one too where you can see Stutzle's reaction. He's mad, obviously, but he gets the minus on that one, right? Like, it's all the forwards are changed after they get the dash, which is why that stat's a little bit flawed. I'd like to see how analytics show bad line changes and stuff. But yeah, like, that's just a bad play. Like, as a former forward, I can say a forward friendly show. Let's put it like that. That was bad. That
forward show.
That was stuff you learn when you're a kid. Like, don't change no matter how tired you are. Just be there. And I'm sure the Sens have been harping that all season, but that was bad, and such a bad time for that to happen too, Pilsy. But thankfully it didn't matter, and we'll get into that afterwards.
And that's probably where you turn to advanced analytics, like expected goals and things like that, Jack, if you want to get those types of plays out of your stat sheets and outliers like that. But yeah, Timmy's face was all time. He was so pissed. He looks right at the Sens bench. And I don't blame him. This guy's on a 12-game point streak. He's battling out there, and he's got to hustle back just to catch a minus because the boys were tired. Like, I don't blame him at all there. We're going to get to our boots on the ground report. And an absolute legend of Sens boots on the ground reports. I don't think anybody has had their boots on more different grounds than this man here. Dr. Bob will join us right after a quick break. You're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast. This is the Postcast. All right, we're here on the Postcast, Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Brandon Piller, joined by Jack Richardson, and joining us now live from Washington, D.C. is our friend Dr. Bob. Bob, a disappointing results here, but an exciting game. Like, tell us about what it was like to be boots on the ground for this back and forth effort.
Well, as you say, it was extremely disappointing in the first 8 minutes. I don't think they should have challenged. I didn't like the challenge. The guys around me, but they were Washington fans at that point didn't like the challenge either. Definitely wouldn't have gone for that. And when you're 8 shots to 1, that's pretty bad. I think Omar kind of muffed it, but he played fantastic later. I think the 2 big turning points were his blocker save on Ovechkin, and in the first period, and then Brady was phenomenal in taking on Wilson. That was true captain stuff, and he won the fight. It happened down in my end. I was in one of the ends, and it was great. And then, we still had the struggle of, I think the big thing in the overtime, you can't not get a goal when you're 4 against 3 in overtime. That was the killer. But we got a point. And, you guys were talking on Friday and before that, if we get 5 out of 6 points, we still have to get Chicago. But you and I know how bad it can be in Chicago. Oh, boy. The last 2 years in Chicago were terrible.
So Bob, I just got a question. This is more big picture, right? Like the Caps and Sens have played some awesome games this year. I think all 3 have gone to OT. The Caps have the edge there, but this is a possible playoff matchup if the Sens sneak in and they're one of those teams. Do you like their chances against Washington, even as the first seed in the East? Because I don't think this would feel like a 1 versus 8 typical playoff series.
I don't really like our chances against Washington. They're an extremely strong team, but and Thompson played really well again tonight. So I like our chances better against the Leafs. I'd love to play the Leafs and maybe the Leafs, but the Leafs have a long way to go to get to first anyway. But what is the standings right now in terms of Washington versus Leafs in Florida?
So, no one's going to catch Washington. They got 86
points.
Okay,
so it's got to be
Florida's at
so
79.
7th. Yeah.
So basically, if the Sens get the second wild card spot, they'll play Washington, and then the first, it's probably either going to be the Leafs or Florida. Yeah. I've got a preferred opponent in that one.
Yeah.
So let's get the second one, the 6th place, the 7th place instead of 8th. That would be great.
Hey. As long as they get in, I don't care. Get in and figure it out. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, guys. But Bob, I see you're rocking the Sens jersey. How many Sens fans were in the arena? Did you meet up with some friends? Was there good pockets of Sens fans?
I met up with a few. There was Dan from actually the embassy. He deals with stuff at the embassy that I can't really talk about right now, but he's under a bunch of stress. But he picked me out, and he was wearing his Sens sweater, and there was probably only about 30 of us total, and it was lots of fun. But the Washington fans are knowledgeable fans, and they're accepting of other teams and crazy people like somebody who goes 165,000 kilometers in 2.5 years to get to. This was game 121, and it's just a fun retirement thing for me. But I'm still not fully retired. I'm still doing some medicine and taking care of a seniors residence. That's why I won't be able to be there on Wednesday in Chicago. I'm working that day, but. It's a Canadian Cancer Society fundraiser. I don't know if Ross is able to pick that one up again. It's www.cancer.ca /Dr. Bob Sens Tour. But if you just Google Dr. Bob Sens Tour, it all comes up too. And I really enjoyed seeing you guys on Saturday. It was phenomenal.
So Bob, we've got one more just before we let you go here. Just it'll be not a big picture question. I won't put you on your heels with this one. Who is your standout? I know you mentioned the captain fighting right in front of you, but you have one standout just to send us off here tonight.
I think Brady was absolutely fantastic, and he scored the tying goal. But I think Pinto was very good tonight, and he got 2 out of the 4 goals. So what can you say? And obviously Sanderson was very good. So if I'm going to pick up my standout, it's going to be Pinto.
Shane Pinto is Dr. Bob's standout. We love
Yeah.
that, Bob. And yeah, it was awesome to see you at the game Saturday as well. We brought some good luck to the Sens. They snapped their losing streak there. Unfortunately, couldn't get a win streak rolling here. But final question for me, Bob, is how many more games you got on the plan here for the rest of the season?
Well, probably about another 5 or 6 out of the next few. But all the playoffs, hoping to get to those playoffs for sure.
We'll see you there.
That'd be great.
Bob.
Take
if
care,
there's
guys.
Playoffs, we'll see you there. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Bob, everyone.
Thanks for
That's
having
Dr.
me.
Bob. Brandon Piller, not a doctor, but he is. Dr. Bob is a doctor.
Take care, guys.
And
Go Sens, go.
Go Sens, go. Definitely check out all the great work he's doing to promote cancer research and raise awareness for an absolute great cause. Dr. Bob, an absolute beauty. Jack, I don't know if you want to, let's wrap up the score here quickly. We left off at 4-3. The Senators, they pull their goalie. There's 1:37 left. They call a timeout. Like you mentioned, player coach Claude Giroux, very vocal on the bench. And then they end up getting a couple draws. They win a couple draws in the zone. And then Sanderson one-timers blocked. He slides it over to Timmy. His one-timer stopped. And then Brady Tkachuk in his office, he bangs it home to tie the game. Just pure emotion and an absolute clutch play by who else but the captain.
He has scored so many clutch goals this season. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Like just perfect, because sometimes when Brady gets, in the media and he's got great quotes, he knows how to drop a good quote, the captain. And sometimes when it happens, then they lose the next game or lose the next couple. I'm like, oh no, like, what, bulletin board material for the other fan bases, whatever. But all that, like, he scored so many big goals this year, Pilsy, and it just makes me so excited down the stretch. And this guy can show up in those big games. We've seen it. We saw it. I'm looking forward to what he brings. And the quote I'm talking about, obviously, is how he said, buckle up and enjoy the ride. And this is the ride, what he was talking about. He earns the Sens another point from his office. What I liked a lot about this goal, too, was Tim Stutzle shooting the puck. I think when he took a one-timer, which was great. So when he's shooting the puck, good things happen. And that was just a great play. I had a feeling they were going to score. Like, you just kind of had a sense like they were locked in there. It was a big moment and a big point that could end up being the difference at the end of the year.
Big time. Yeah. So then it goes to overtime and the Capitals get a too many men penalty. A smart play by Shabby here. I don't think everybody knows what Shabby did here, because he's in his own corner behind the net and heads up. He sees, I'm not sure which player it is, maybe Pinto, way down across the ice past the benches. He looks up. He notices a Cap player is trying to get off and change. So he's like, I got two options here. I'm going to fling it up to that Sens player, and either the Caps player is going to touch it and they're going to get too many men, or the Caps player is going to be like, oh crap, I can't touch that. I got to let it go. And then you've just sprung a breakaway in overtime. So either way, it's a good result. The Cap player touches it. It's too many men. Spencer Carberry can't believe it. He's beside himself that this has happened. The Ottawa Senators get a power play, and they were ripping the pill on the power play. At that point, Jack, 17 of the Sens' 34 shots came on the power play. Half of their shots were on the power play. They end up with 21 total shots on the power play, and Logan Thompson stole the show here. 2 glove saves, one on Batherson, one on Chabot. It's that pesky, silly cider goalie where you're goofy and you're catching with your right hand, and I don't know what it does. It's just different. It's just weird, and players aren't used to it, but that glove hand was very effective for Thompson tonight.
It gets in your head as a shooter. If a goalie catches with his right hand, like it's tough. And when he's that good too, Thompson's a good goalie. Like, he's had a great year. And what's funny too about the Caps is their backup, their other goalie, also catches with his right hand. So maybe their system is geared towards that. It sounds a little crazy.
Both of them, Jack. So they're all in on the right glove catching goalies.
Yeah, I think there's like 4 in the league or something, and they have 2 of them. So it works. And you can tell too, they were kind of forcing it to that side. And I don't know, you can go in circles about this. Were you okay with the 4 guys who are out there with Sanderson, Batherson, Stutzle, and Tkachuk? Like, I personally would have liked to see Shane Pinto out there, just because, like, you don't want to be a reactionary and ride the hot hand, but I find that none of those guys were shooters really, like I know Sanderson's got a lot like, don't get me wrong. They're all great and it's hard to go wrong. I just thought that, get Norris's one-timer out there or something. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to win. And if they scored, I'd be saying a different thing, but I was really surprised just to not see Shane Pinto get a look there because he was having a great game. He has 2 goals, go for the hat trick. And also I think he has a great quick release for those situations.
No, that's fair. I certainly thought Pinto was having a better game than Batherson, and maybe make the swap there. But Batherson's shot was pretty good. Like that was an amazing glove save.
I actually did. I won't mention him as a standout. We can get into our standouts right now because we don't have to talk about the shootout. Pilsy shootouts suck. No. But this was a tie. The Caps didn't get 2 points. This ended in a tie. I thought Batherson actually had a pretty good game. I know that he's had a rough stretch recently. But earlier on, I thought when the team didn't have their best game, I thought actually Drake had his legs moving more than I've seen him in the last little bit. So that's a positive sign. I don't think he got on the score sheet tonight. But yeah, I didn't hate the way he played on that power play either. When they don't score on a 4-on-3 full 2 minutes, it's easy to kind of pick apart. You're saying, why, like, get Pinto out there at least once. I don't know, man, but tough one. But who you want to go first, Pillsy? I think we could probably go twice. Do we do twice on a loss though? I don't know.
I mean, it was a pretty good game. We'll see how we're feeling here because we're at 40 minutes here. We're going long here, but it was an exciting game. And maybe I shouldn't have gone through every goal on this one, but that's how I like to break it down and work through it, especially a game like this. You graciously snapped it over to me, Jack. So I'll go first. My SensCentral standout for this game was Claude Giroux. He had that goal we talked about. We don't often get to see the grizzled vet wind up and take an absolute clapper like that and have it connect and have it go in. So that was his goal. He also had an assist, and then he played 22 minutes and 22 seconds. Only Brady Tkachuk of forwards had more. And Tim Stutzle. Brady and Timmy, his line mates, were the only ones that had more ice time for forwards. And Jack, you probably know where I'm going with this. Where I thought Claude Giroux's game shined the most was in the faceoff, as it typically does. Claude Giroux finished 78.6% in the draws. And when you go to faceoff summary, even more specifically, he had, sorry, I lost my place. Here it is, 11 for 14 in the draws. How about 7 for 7, 100% in the O-zone? Like, that's winning those O-zone draws are just so huge. So Claude Giroux, and then we already mentioned it, but I'll just throw it into my SensCentral standout. Him being the player coach and really taking over that meeting during the Sens timeout, which ultimately led to them scoring and tying the game up on that power play, just shows you all those things I mentioned, just shows you what Claude Giroux brings. Maybe he doesn't have the goal scoring and the point streaks like he did when he first got here, but the value that this guy brings to a team like the Ottawa Senators is so immense. So Claude Giroux, my SensCentral standout, presented by the Glebe Central Pub.
Before I get into mine, I actually want to touch on something that was mentioned in your guys' interview that dropped today with Josh Norris. So after the postcast, go check that out if you haven't yet. It was a great sit down you guys had with him. And what I liked what he mentioned is when he talked about Giroux is how he's helped Norris in the faceoff dot, and mentioned he had to switch things after his shoulder surgeries and whatever on that line. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because Norris won the draw on that game winner. It was Norris who had to take the draw because it was on the other side. He wins it, and then they end up scoring. So and in the interview, he talks about obviously how Giroux kind of showed him how to take draws and got him better at it, whatever it is. So I think that's a great pick. Giroux had a great game tonight, I thought. I'm just going to go with Jake Sanderson again. If I get to talk about Jake Sanderson, I'll talk about Jake Sanderson. He is so good, Pilsy. I don't know what happened to him earlier in the season. There was something going on partner-wise, but it's beyond that now. He's stepped up his game past the point of being a shutdown guy. He's now a guy you need to match up against, in my opinion. Like, he's that good. He looks like Erik Karlsson out there. Did anyone else get flashes of him when he's buzzing up the ice? That 8'5" look a little bit like a 65. He was everywhere, Pilsy. I just couldn't believe it. And he's got that ability, but to me, it really did seem like he just said, screw this. I'm going to do it myself, essentially. Like, he willed them back into this game, I thought. 2 primary assists on the first 2 goals for the Sens tonight. So I can't say enough about Jake Sanderson. Thankfully, he's okay after that play on Saturday, which looked pretty dangerous. He looked shaken up. He's been battling stuff, but the other thing I liked and I mentioned it before, his battling with Tom Wilson, didn't back down, just
Yep.
gave it right back to him and got in his head a little bit. And then he stood his ground, and doing that is so important as a shutdown defenseman. You need to earn that respect from your opponents during the game. And he's just so good at everything. And I think he's at like 14 points in his last 12 games, 15 points, just nuts. He's been outstanding.
Yeah, he finishes the night with 3 assists. And how about this, Jack? 31 minutes, 49 seconds in total ice time. Like, the guy is just a machine. And I believe with that, he is at a career high in points. If this isn't updated, I'm not sure if Elite Prospects is updated or not, but like, he's just absolutely buzzing this season. So Jake Sanderson is a great pick for tonight's SensCentral Standout presented by the Glebe Central Pub. And our guy, Dr. Bob, had Pinto. If people are like, how do you guys not have Pinto in this one? Our guy, Dr. Bob, had him. Or did he have the captain? He's had a couple names there. I forget what he...
we don't have to go around twice because he mentioned a few guys. I think he mentioned Omar, Tkachuk, and Pinto. But I'm glad that we got Pinto in there. I don't actually think we need to go around twice. But it was like, that's a big game from the Sens. I know they lost, but I've got some pep in my step. It was good to see, because if they just keeled over, it wouldn't have left a good taste in our mouths. I think that was probably their hardest game standings wise left on the schedule, which is crazy to say, because so over a month and a half left of the season, but things are looking up for the Ottawa Senators.
Big time. Yep. And if you want to look up for some more analysis from a Sens player himself, Jack already referenced it. Nice little tease there by Jack. We had Josh Norris on the show today. Go check out our interview with Josh Norris. It was amazing. This guy's an absolute beauty. We went more than 20 minutes with him, and he gave lots of great info. And we just had some laughs too. A bunch of it wasn't even talking about hockey, talking about restaurants, talking about golf, what other sports he likes to do, what chores he does around the house, things like that. So definitely go check that out on Locked On Senators YouTube and Locked On Senators podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Let's wrap up with this one real quickly. Adam Rogers says, so I'm just putting it out there. He's just putting it out there, guys. What could Giroux's trade value be? I'm going to be quick on this. I'm not, and I've mentioned this multiple times, the only way you even consider trading Claude Giroux is if he demands it or asks it, because he's earned that right and he's earned the respect as a longtime NHLer and for the work he's put in for this organization. And it hasn't necessarily gone the way he probably would have hoped. If he asks for a trade, then you consider it. But unless that, I'm going to disavow the question. I know you're just putting it out there, Adam, but for me, I'm not even going to get into Claude Giroux's trade value, because I don't think it's something the Sens should even think about.
Yeah, I don't even know I don't even know how to quantify it at this point, where the team is, where they're at. I know he's pending a UFA, but I think Bruce said it in the intermission. He's not going anywhere. The only thing I could see them doing that would actually make sense for the team today is if you're getting an upgrade in that top 6 in that trade. It wouldn't be for picks or anything like that. Like, it just, in the message to the team, like, what would you do? We're talking about this team adding, and I think that's a discussion for later on this week. They have one more game, Pilsy, for the trade deadline, Wednesday in Chicago. And that's it. So we'll see who they add, and they're heading to Chicago. There's a guy on Chicago I think a lot of Sens fans are looking at. So we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing, but they will not be trading Claude Giroux, especially after tonight's performance.
Yeah, definitely not. Unfortunately, it ends up in a 5-4 shootout loss, but the Senators do get a point, and they were down 3-0 to the top team in the East. Let's just keep that there. So 1 point, you got to take that there, as the Senators were outshot 41-37. The Senators get 7 power play opportunities. They convert on 2 of them. Washington converts on 1 of their 4. The Sens dominated in the faceoff percentage, largely thanks to Claude Giroux, 57.1 to 42.9. Blocks. The Caps were blocking pucks, getting in lanes. They had 27. Ottawa had 14. The Sens were physical, 21 hits to the Capitals' 10. And the 5-on-5 expected goals percentage in the Caps' favor, 57.9 to the Senators' 42.1 in a 5-4 shootout loss on the road at the hands of the Washington Capitals. Jack, any final thoughts before we wrap things up here?
Just lots of playoff hockey down the stretch. That felt like a playoff game to me. I'm of the other opinion of Dr. Bob. I think this would be a good matchup for the Sens.
I'm with you, Jack.
These games. I was at that second one in Ottawa. It was electric, just like tonight. That was fun. I hope we get more of that for game 83, 84, 85, 86. But we'll cross that bridge. A lot to get to. But that's a big point, big point in the standings.
You went up to game 86, Jack. So if they face the Capitals, you're thinking it's going to be a Sens sweep, just a 4-game series?
Well, that's just all that's guaranteed. I'm just going. I counted game 1, 2, 3, and 4. But yeah, I like when people say we're playing to get to game 83. We play all 82 to get to 83. But yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one, man. And just everyone around them, like it's so tight. The good news is though, they play everyone around them still for the most part. So I'm excited. Yep,
the Sens can control their own destiny, and it starts with a tough matchup up against shouldn't be tough, but they've had their number up against the Chicago Blackhawks in Chicago. I twitch every time I think about that. But that's all we got for tonight. A 5-4 shootout loss to the Washington Capitals. This has been the Postcast. I'm Brandon Piller, joined by Jack Richardson, producer Ross behind the board. Dr. Bob had our Boots on the Ground report presented by the Glebe Central Pub. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.